success isn't achieved by doing one big thing. It's by doing a lot of small things. You don't get, it's kind of like he has the analogy about business. Either you can back up and try and jump across the creek all in one shot, or you can kind of go up and down the creek and look and jump from stone to stone. And it takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more perseverance, but you're a lot more likely to get to the other side if you take it stone by stone.
Welcome to Shaping the Basin. I'm here with Rye Kliewer. Hi, Rye.
Hi.
A lot of people probably know you as part of Skyline Brewing, but tell us what else you do, because there's a lot.
What else I do? Okay, so I'm a farmer by trade. That's my primary livelihood. And then I'm co-owner of Skyline Brewing Company. I'm also co-owner of Millhouse Spirits on the island of Maui. And then I have the, I guess you would say, privilege of being a representative of people's irrigation interests. I'm the board of directors president of the Klamath Basin Improvement District. And I'm also on the Klamath Water Users Association board of directors. And I sit on numerous other advisory committees and all that kind of fun stuff. And those are the only ones that I take blame for.
I'm like, which direction do I want to go? But I want to start with, why are you involved in all of those things?
I guess because I can be. People ask me to. Water in the Klamath Basin, obviously, that is its own 25-year, well, longer than 25 years. This is the 25th anniversary since 2001's full water curtailment. And obviously, you see things aren't going super great with a restricted amount of water yet again this year. So we really haven't made a super lot of progress as far as resolving the overarching issues and trying to bring it to a conclusion. But, I guess most people would say I like to serve my community and all that different kind of stuff, but people's voices need to be heard. And I guess it's kind of like this, is you get to broadcast, the narrative that people want you to represent them with. And so here I am.
Here you are. Did you grow up in farming?
Yes. Short version, long story, my dad met when my mom worked at Big R, my dad worked at Stuckel Rock and Paving, and they both had this desire to farm. At that point in time, everybody said, if you're not born into it, you can't make it. And so they started accumulating, old beat up equipment in the 1970s. I can only imagine how old and beat up that equipment was. Their first swather cost $200. So they started out small and just worked their way up. And then finally, my dad quit the paving company, and my brother and myself were born throughout the time and just kind of kept slowly growing. And then I was driving a tractor when I was 6 years old, and the farm kind of kept growing around the family and supporting us. And so that's how I got into it. It probably, unfortunately, literally in my blood.
That's funny. Did you know at a young age you wanted to be in farming when you grew up?
Not really. Kind of like most people when you're young and ambitious and all that kind of stuff, the world is your oyster, so to speak, and you have hopes and dreams of doing different things and all that kind of stuff. But kind of like every other young person, finding a direction, plotting out goals and all that different kind of stuff was obviously a challenge for a guy who's kind of a dreamer. And so trying to get stuff plotted down about what I wanted to do. I went to Len Benton. I spent a whopping 40 days at Len Benton Community College, and I learned a lot about things that I wasn't in school to learn about. But anyways, I blew through a lot of money, and ultimately, after my pickup got broke into, in the lovely town of Albany, apparently people will just take your things. And I don't like that.
Mhm.
And so I decided it was time for me to probably come back to where things were a little bit more secure and familiar. And at that point in time, I was like, if I'm going to do something, I better farm and I better start getting stuff figured out. Because my dad told me when I was younger, he goes, if you want to farm, you better figure out how to do it because I'm not going to give you anything. He didn't lie. And so uh, try to find, kind of like they did, really good deals on old beat up equipment and try to make it better. You know, I bought a big baler one time, had the plunger in it was bent sideways, and I was like, it's cheap. I can find a plunger for it. And hours and hours and hours later, I finally got it put back together. And the goal is always to sell it for more than you paid for it.
Mhm.
And so by the time it's said and done, that's kind of how I progress through to what equipment I have is by buying something that's beat up, fixing it up, run it, sell it, buy another, rent a wreck, and keep on moving forward.
Yeah. What in relation to you mentioned the 25th anniversary, in relation to that time to when you started farming, what was that like? Was it a few years before, right around the same time?
So I graduated in 1997. When I came back in 98, I did have kind of jobs that I did. I worked at Big R, oddly enough, it runs in the family. I did a short stint at Lake Thomas Lumber. I cleaned up at night for Diamond S Meat Company. I worked at Bettendorf Trucking for a while. And, those were those were not my future career jobs. Those were just I was a cleanup guy in the shop and all that kind of stuff. I fixed tire chains and changed tires and all that different kind of stuff at Bettendorf. And then I did work in the farm center at Big R, and that was kind of in my wheelhouse, I guess. But it was kind of to get through the thin times. And then actually in 2001, I worked at a cabinet shop. And so I did get the opportunity to learn cabinet making. And no, he didn't even teach me all he knows, but George Applegate is a brilliant cabinet maker. And so I was very privileged to learn that as far as a trade. And then it was after 2001 that kind of made the ultimate decision to really sink my teeth in and go for farming. And why after 2001, when everybody was going, get out, I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. That's kind of how that whole thing came about.
Yeah. Uh, I feel like this is a really kind of dumb question, but what has it been like since 2001? Like really personally?
So I've only been involved in the representation side for about the last 10, 12 years. So I was fairly naive before that. So like from 2001 uh, to 2010, honestly, it was kind of a coast, I guess you would say. We seem to more often than not have ample water supplies and all that. We got through with a bunch of really good hydrology, and then it was post 2010 that everything started kind of getting even more drier and drier and drier. And so was like 2019 was the last, except for last year, was the last full allocation year. And then there's been, especially since 2020, it's just been terrible, with the exception of last year because we had phenomenal winter. And even with that, though, the tail end of last year, it was almost to turn into a bad situation, but we made it through. And then this year, with the warm winter that we had, everything came in rain. I think we got up to like a whopping 14% snowpack, and the writing was on the wall early. So we at least kind of knew that it was coming, but we still know that they're regulatory droughts. Um, I guess I'm not going to bring all the scientific, debate and all that kind of stuff into this conversation, but you would hope that after 25 years, especially on Upper Klamath Lake, that we would have seen recovery of the species, and same downstream, that you would see recovery of those, especially after dam removal. And then seeing the data sets that we've seen about disease and downstream and its proliferation, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And we're still doing this more water equals more fish, which doesn't work out. And if we don't start trying to do something different, we're going to watch both of the species go away. So I just hope that people kind of put their pride or whatever it is aside and go, let's solve this once and for all.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what that's going to take?
What it's going to take?
Yeah. Do you have ideas?
A lot of prayer. People don't want to concede anything. And I mean, unfortunately, I don't know whether it's like the scientists, whether there's a lot of pride in it, or maybe they have their head in their hands going, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But like the water quality in Upper Klamath Lake, there's probably already, if not, but annually, there's always a public health advisory for the algal blooms in Upper Klamath Lake. That algae creates anoxic waters through the daily growth and then decomposition, and just decimates habitat. We aren't doing anything about the algae. And it's like, why don't we start moving the needle in a different direction? It's not about high lake elevations and all this different kind of stuff as originally theorized. We tried that for 25 years and apparently it didn't work. The last successful recruitment of suckerfish was in 1992. In 1992, Upper Klamath Lake got down to 4137.6 or below. Like, they were afraid that we weren't going to be able to get water down the A canal. It was so low. And at one point in time, Link River at Keno was running 75 CFS. And right now it's running 650. But what happened the winter of 92? There was a great salmon run. And that was the last year. This was a successful recruitment of larval to juvenile fish for suckerfish in Upper Klamath Lake. So instead of trying what worked, we're trying a bunch of other stuff. Maybe we ought to go try something else.
Yeah. You mentioned early on you're a dreamer. Are you still a dreamer? Are you still a dreamer when it comes to ag?
I can't help it. Yeah,
you're still dreaming.
I consider myself to be a dreamer. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's one of the benefits of ADDHD. You sit there and my mom actually pulled out some of my old report cards, and one of the teachers wrote on the report card, if Ryan would stop daydreaming and apply himself, he would actually be a very good student. And it's like, you can't always make yourself focus. Sometimes it's like, I wonder what would happen if, and then off goes your thoughts. But sometimes you come up with something good.
Yeah. So along those lines, was dreaming how you ended up in beer and spirits?
By strange coincidence.
Yeah.
So Ty is actually the mastermind behind I would say all the beer. He taught me just enough to be dangerous when it comes to making beer. So I've had a couple of contributions of very simple beers and all that different kind of stuff. But as far as the development of recipes, Ty is a very good mind, a brilliant mind, I will say, for like composition, I guess you would say. It's kind of like with cows. He can look at a cow and a bull, and it's like almost tell you what the calf is going to look like. And I mean, that's genetics. That's throwing a bunch of DNA dice in a cup, shaking it, rolling it out, and seeing what happens. But he said one time that it's kind of like the part he likes about brewing is instead of having to wait for 9 months for a calf to hit the ground, you only have to wait a couple days for the beer to ferment. And so he's kind of the mastermind of that. But I'm more of the mechanic, if you will. My thing is I like developing systems, processes, and all that kind of stuff. I think I would have probably been okay at manufacturing engineering or, something that's more process based and all that kind of stuff. Instead of going to school, though, I've had to learn everything through the world of hard knocks. And life is a terrible teacher because you get the test and then you learn the lesson after the test is through. But a lot of trial and error and all that different kind of stuff. So, but yeah, the brewery was kind of by happenstance, because I knew that Ty's garage days of brewing, he needed facilities to do what he does well. And so one day I went over and we were talking about a brewery, and we kind of had our minds in this box about we need to build a building or go rent a building and do all this kind of stuff. And finally, one day, he had the old milk parlor sitting out behind the house there, and it was like, why don't we use this? Typically, breweries can't fit under an 8-foot ceiling, but when you find the right equipment, you can make it fit under an 8-foot ceiling. And when you build your own equipment, you can definitely make it fit under an 8-foot ceiling. So then came the learning curve of like the processes of brewing and what all equipment was necessary for cooling for like a mash tun, brew kettle, bright tanks, pumps, chillers, yada yada yada. I mean, there was all that different kind of stuff that I walked into. I had made one batch of beer before we started building the brewery, and I equate it to like George Washington's beer. They said George Washington's spirits were fantastic, but his beer was so putrid, he was the only one who would drink it. And so that's kind of what my beer was. But I just knew enough about fermentation from distilling to try to make a beer, and was like, no, there's too much of that. I'll do distilling instead. So that's kind of how the brewery came together.
It's easy to get lost. Don't know which path to take, what to post. In the social media jungle, video is king. Your kids are obsessed, your customers are addicted, we're all hooked, and social media sites prioritize videos. So when you're ready to stand out from the crowd, reach out to 40 Deuce Films. Feeling over everything.
But now you've got these spirits in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
You said, tell me about that.
Okay. So again, by happenstance, I just happened to be in Maui. And this is kind of a little bit of a longer story. So I was over there doing some work helping Highly Miley Pineapple try to develop an organic rotation of pineapple. And so we took soybean seed over to the island to do kind of start like a crop rotation, but we knew that we needed to affix a lot of nitrogen in the soil. And so edamame beans for soybean are fairly popular. So we were going to try to do like an edamame harvest, and then while it's still green, incorporate that back in the soil to get that green manure nitrogen. And so right across the road from Highly and Miley Pineapple is Highly Miley Distilling. So we decided one day, we got done early, we're like, let's go do a tour. And so we went across the road, and my friend Jason Blodgett was with me on that one. And so we were walking around talking to the owner and all this different kind of stuff. And there's this guy over there, like taping boxes up, casing up spirits and everything. And so I'm the kind, if you're doing something, I'll just kind of chime in with you. So I started opening up boxes and folding the tops over and handing them to him. And all of a sudden he sets his stuff down, he walks off. So I pick up his tape and I just kind of keep doing his job. And he gets back and he's kind of giving me a glare. And I was like, okay. So anyways, we go on about our thing, trip ends, come home. A couple of years later, I go back over there, and a friend of mine was like, there's a guy that you really need to meet. And so we actually met down in a field, and here comes this guy walking up. And it was the same guy who kind of glared at me for helping him with his job. His name's also Ryan, so we have something in common. And I was like, oh, I think this guy hates me because I was like doing his job for him, and learned that apparently it was because I wasn't taping the boxes perfectly square. He's very
Oh,
particular about how he does stuff. And so, anyways, we met, and he was like, we were talking about distilling, and next thing you know, we become friends and kind of keep in conversation and everything. He called me one day and he's like, do you still want to be part of a distillery over here? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, I met a guy who would like to do it as well. And I think between the three of us, we can make this happen. And so went back over well, actually they came over here because we designed the hurricane distillation system, and they came out to the shop to see it work, which is kind of pressure to have on you, strangers coming from some from California and some from Hawaii, to see the system that you built run. And then everything just started coming together. And so we built the Cat 2 hurricane still to go over to Maui. And that is the still for Millhouse Spirits that makes rum agricole.
very neat. And did you design that hurricane system? And
So the first time we met out in the field after I was taping the boxes wrong, he's like, have you ever heard of the coffee still? And I was like, no. And at that point in time, I was like a pot still purist. If it wasn't copper and it's not a pot and it doesn't have a boiler and arm, you can use a thumper keg. That's fine. If it's not that and a condenser coil, I don't want anything to do with it. And he's like, you would totally dork out on that. And so, sure enough, I've looked at it and I was like, okay, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. But it didn't have the coffee still is a very efficient continuous distillation process. You're feeding your essentially beer in one direction and using it as your coolant media to condense your spirits back into a liquid. And at the same point in time, it's coming in towards the heat and separating out the alcohol. So it's kind of like a cross heat exchange kind of scenario. And so, anyways, I saw the brilliance and I was going, there's ways that you could actually improve that and make it even more efficient. And ultimately, with the aid of my colleague, Derek Pallett, who we call Smart Guy, who lives up to his name, he is one brilliant human being. We made the modifications and changes and additions and a couple deletions and made the hurricane distillation system a thing. So it can continuously distill to 192 proof.
yeah. So being a dreamer took you from farming to plant and Klamath to also Hawaii
Also
and
Hawaii.
pineapple and rum.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Sometimes.
I do have to ask a question.
Yes.
What do you farm here?
We raise alfalfa hay, cereal grains, and then we also have cows.
Yeah, and I know you'd never wanted cows, did you?
Cows are not my thing. I had cows when I was growing up. That's kind of part of being a farm kid, is you have your cows and all that kind of stuff. As I like to tell people, Ty does the cows, I'm more the plows. That's kind of our part. And so when Lorena and I got married, I told her, I said, I had cows and I sold them for a reason because I do not like cows. And your wife bats her eyes at you and says, but I like cows. And so we start out with 4. Now there's 27 pair. And I think we're up to 4 bulls now. And they just keep replicating. So
Now you're also a cow guy.
yeah, well, by mandate. But the girls, Gracie is really into cows. She's a very, very good fitter. She does really well with show cattle, and Alana has more kind of the commercial end of cows. But both of them did 4-H growing up. Did very well in 4-H. And so Grace had actually 3 grand champions of the Klamath County Fair. Alana had
Right.
a grand champion and a reserve grand champion at the Klamath County Fair. And so the girls really have done well with their animals.
That's awesome. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but you're thinking of alfalfa, green heron, that sort of thing. How did you get to pineapple in Hawaii?
So we went to Maui. Lorinda, myself, and the girls went to Maui for a vacation one year. And at that point in time, for Lorinda to get me to go anywhere is like pulling teeth. I honestly probably would have rather gone to the dentist, and I do not like the dentist. But we went over to Maui. We were there for 5 days, I want to say. And we went on the sugarcane train. It's at the foot of the old Pioneer mill over right above Lahaina. And they had the old sugar cane that took the cane from the field back to the mill. So they made little carts, and you got to ride up the foot of pretty much the canopoli where the fields were. And it was idle at that point in time. They hadn't grown sugar cane for a while. And so I was looking up the fields, just going, somebody needs to do something farm wise with this ground. And so it was, I think the next year we got together a group of friends. We went over, we stayed for about 10 days, and I just went and started talking to anybody who was willing to talk. We went and talked to Farm Bureau representatives, Warren Watanabe. We met Darren Strand at Highly Miley Pineapple, John Varell at Waihee Valley Plantation, Chauncey Mond at Kula Country Farms, and just went and learned. And then we actually got the opportunity. We built a macadamia nut sorter for John Varell at Waihee Valley Plantation. And then I think that was enough credibility that people saw that we said we could do something. We did it, and we followed through. Then Darren Strand was like, hey, what do you know about organics? And it's like, my farm operation's certified organic. What else do you need to know? And so he's like, what do you think about doing this? So I was like, we need to figure out the crop rotation first. And we started working on that. And then everything else that I told you kind of came out of that.
That's neat. Well, we're almost to the end of our time. I know, it's crazy, right?
There is definitely going to have to be a part 2.
We'll do a part 2. You can bring some rum from the spirits, and we'll have a part 2.
Fair enough. Actually, I should probably make you your own whiskey of some kind.
I think you should. I would not say no.
No, okay.
I'll even be part of it. That'd be kind of fun to learn about.
Maybe we can do an on-site podcast.
Oh, we'll have to talk to our producer. Jared might say yes to that.
Fair enough.
All right. But one question I had was we talked about you being a dreamer, and then you have the farming going on and this distillery, and you're part owner of Skyline Brewing. So what do you dream of for the next 5 years or 10 years?
Honestly, my mind's been wrapped around trying to figure out how to finally solve the Klamath Basin water situation. And then 2 is, as you get older, things you can't do what you did when you were young. So you have to work smarter, not harder. And so efficiency and trying to come up with things to innovate different ways to be able to do the same thing, but a lot easier. And so those are the next things that I'm kind of plugging away at.
Nice. Well, we'll come back with whiskey and rum and all of that good stuff. But fun questions I ask everyone at the end. If I gave you $250,000 to do something today to make a difference in the community, what would you do with it?
Farm until it's all gone? Hell, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's a lot of resources, but I guess for some of the bigger things, it's going to take a lot more money than that to solve those problems. Man, I don't know. I'll have to tell you on part 2.
Okay, so come back for that. Do you have a role model?
Yeah, my dad.
Yeah.
My dad doesn't know it, but well, I hope he does, because I've tried to tell him before, but my dad is my hero. Just relentless is a word that describes my dad. He doesn't quit. And, you know, he's the one who taught me that when you get knocked down, you dust yourself off, you get back up, and you keep moving forward. Success isn't achieved by doing one big thing. It's by doing a lot of small things. You don't get, it's kind of like he has the analogy about business. Either you can back up and try and jump across the creek all in one shot, or you can kind of go up and down the creek and look and jump from stone to stone. And it takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more perseverance, but you're a lot more likely to get to the other side if you take it stone by stone. And so my dad has taught me tremendous amounts of things, and I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for my dad.
Nice. Do you have a favorite book? Do you read?
Only when I have to. I'm trying to think. Favorite book that's not like a manual for a piece of equipment or something or another.
I think
It
that
can be-
answers our question.
It can be.
You read for a
Actually,
purpose.
Everybody always likes C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. Those were really good books.
I have never read those.
You never have?
I never have.
Oh, see,
Not even
and
in
that's the thing.
school.
I'm not much of a reader, but those were pretty easy for me to like almost like play out the movie in my head as you were reading it. I don't know if that's due to the author or whatever, but and then the books on malting. Actually, those are some really good books too.
Yeah.
Thermodynamics.
All right, you lost me. Let's go back to Narnia. I'm just kidding.
Fair enough. So,
Rye, thank you for your time
Oh,
today.
thank you very
I
much.
appreciate it. And thank you to our producer, 40 Deuce Films.